I remember the exact moment my hands stopped shaking long enough to answer the phone. I was sitting in the waiting area outside the cardiac unit at St. Luke's, still wearing the same wrinkled button-down I put on 3 days earlier, and the number on the screen said it was from the county sheriff's office. I almost didn't pick up. I thought it was about my son-in-law's accident, that maybe there'd been some update on the insurance claim, or maybe the other driver had filed something new. It had been that kind of month. The kind where bad news arrives in batches, like bills. "Is this Douglas Mercer?" the voice said. "Speaking," I said. "Mr. Mercer, we've received a complaint. Your wife filed a report this morning alleging harassment and stalking. She's claiming you followed her on multiple occasions over the past 6 weeks, including to a property in Asheville and twice to a shopping center in Hendersonville." I didn't say anything for a moment. "The cardiac unit is on the 4th floor. I had been there for 71 hours straight, sleeping in the recliner beside my younger brother's bed while the nurses adjusted his drip and the monitors beeped through the night. My brother had come through his second bypass, but just barely. Our older sister had flown in from Phoenix. We'd been eating vending machine sandwiches and taking turns keeping watch. "Sir," the deputy said. "I'm in the hospital," I said. "I've been here since Sunday." There was a pause on his end. "Which hospital?" "St. Luke's, in Asheville. My brother had open heart surgery." Another pause, longer this time. "Can you provide verification of that?" I looked up at the ceiling. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Down the hall, a nurse was pushing a cart. My brother's door was 20 feet away. My name was on the sign-in sheet at the front desk, on the visitor log for his room, on the cafeteria charge I'd put on my debit card that morning. "I can provide you with the name of his surgeon, the floor nurse, the charge I made at the hospital cafeteria this morning at 7:43 a.m., and the fact that I have been sleeping in that room over there for 3 nights, I said. I wasn't angry. I was too tired to be angry. What I cannot tell you is how my wife thinks I was following her anywhere when I haven't left this building since Sunday morning. My wife, we'd been married for 31 years, had always been the kind of woman who could make a room feel smaller. Not in a cruel way. Not at first. She had presence. She was organized, deliberate, clear about what she wanted. I had admired that about her when we met. I still admired it, in the abstract, even after everything fell apart. We had raised 2 kids in that house on Ridgecrest Road. Our daughter lives in Raleigh now with her husband and our 2 grandchildren. Our son is out in Colorado doing something with tech that I still don't fully understand. The house had been too quiet for a few years. That's not an excuse. That's just a fact. The problems in our marriage didn't start suddenly. They never do. Looking back, I'd say the first real crack appeared sometime around my 62nd birthday. I had retired from my position at the engineering firm 8 months earlier, and I was still adjusting. 34 years of showing up somewhere every morning, and then one day you just don't anymore. I took on some consulting work, nothing serious, mostly to have something to do with my hands. My wife had her routines, her book club, her garden, her lunches with friends I barely knew. We moved through the house like we were on different schedules in a shared vacation rental. Polite. Functional. Quiet. She started leaving earlier in the mornings that spring. I didn't ask where. I told myself she was at the garden center or visiting her sister in Weaverville. She had always been independent. I respected that. But by May, something had shifted in the way she spoke to me. Short sentences, answers, but no conversation. She'd put her phone face down on the counter whenever I walked into the kitchen. I'm not a confrontational man by nature. I grew up watching my own father avoid difficult conversations until they became impossible ones, and I had promised myself I wouldn't repeat that. So one Saturday afternoon, when she came home from wherever she'd been and put her bag down on the bench by the door, I asked her to sit with me for a moment. "Is there something you want to tell me?" I said. She looked at me the way you look at a stranger who's asked you for directions when you're already late. A flicker of something, irritation maybe, or calculation. Not particularly, she said. Why? Because we haven't had a real conversation in 2 months, I said. Because you leave every morning without telling me where you're going. Because you put your phone down when I walk in the room. I'm not doing anything wrong, she said, which was not the same thing as telling me what she was doing. I didn't push it. I told her I wasn't accusing her of anything. I told her I was worried about us. She said she was fine, that I was projecting, that retirement had made me paranoid, and then she went upstairs and ran a bath, and that was the end of the conversation. I sat in the kitchen for a long time after that. A week later, my brother called from Asheville and told me the doctors had found something on his last scan. He was calm about it. He's always been calmer than me. But I could hear the current underneath his voice, the thing he wasn't saying out loud. I drove up to see him that weekend. We sat on his porch and drank decaf and talked about our parents and the old neighborhood and what the doctors had said. I drove home Sunday night with a feeling I couldn't quite name, something between grief and clarity. My wife did not come to the hospital when my brother had his surgery. She had said she would. She had said she would drive up with me on Sunday morning and we'd be there together when they took him in. On Saturday night, she told me she wasn't feeling well. Headache, she said. She thought she might be coming down with something. She couldn't risk it, given his condition, given the sterile environment. I told her I understood. I drove up alone at 5 in the morning and sat in that waiting room while they opened my brother's chest and stopped his heart and started it again. Our older sister flew in from Phoenix and held my hand in the waiting area. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. My brother came through. We stayed. It was on the 3rd day, Tuesday morning, sitting outside his room with a cup of terrible hospital coffee, that my phone rang, and the deputy told me my wife had filed a harassment complaint. She had described specific incidents. She said I had followed her to a property outside Asheville, which, given that I was currently in Asheville because my brother nearly died, had a certain bitter irony to it. She said I had parked outside a shopping center in Hendersonville and watched her from my car on 2 separate occasions. She said she felt unsafe. She said she was afraid. The date she had given for the Hendersonville incident, the Thursday before my brother's surgery. I had been consulting on a project in Morganton that Thursday. I had driven there, sat in a meeting for 4 hours, driven home. I had the mileage records. I had the email chain. I had the receipt from a gas station on Highway 70 at 11:42 a.m. The date she said I'd been to Asheville. 3 weeks earlier. I had been in Charlotte that weekend for my daughter's youngest child's birthday. We have photographs. There are 47 of them on my daughter's phone, time-stamped, with my face in most of them, blowing out candles next to a 3-year-old wearing a dinosaur hat. I told the deputy all of this. Slowly. Calmly. He listened. "Sir," he said finally, "I'd like you to understand that we're required to follow up on any complaint we receive. I'm not making any judgments here. I understand your job," I said. "I'm not asking you not to follow up. I'm asking you to look at the documentation." He said he would be in touch. I hung up and sat there for a long time, watching the nurses move in and out of my brother's room, watching the early morning light come in through the window at the end of the hall, and felt something settle in me that I hadn't expected. Not anger, not panic. Something more like recognition. I called my daughter that afternoon. I told her what had happened. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Dad, she's been seeing someone." I didn't respond right away. "I wasn't going to say anything until you were home," my daughter said. "But she has. My friend Meredith saw them at dinner in Asheville. 6 weeks ago. She didn't know whether to tell me. She told me 2 weeks ago, and I've been sitting on it. 6 weeks ago. The same timeline my wife had given the sheriff's office. I thought about the morning she left without saying where she was going. I thought about the phone placed face down on the counter. I thought about the Saturday afternoon when I asked her to sit with me and she said, "I'm not doing anything wrong." And then I understood, not just the situation, the geometry of it. The reason for the complaint. She wasn't trying to punish me. She was trying to build a wall, a paper trail, a version of events that, if things progressed a certain way, if she decided she wanted out, if there were lawyers and filings and asset negotiations, would give her something to point to. A record of my instability, my obsession, my failure to leave her alone. She knew I was in Asheville because I told her I was going to be there. She filed the report while I was at the hospital because she knew I was at the hospital. I sat with that for a while. I drove home on Wednesday morning after my sister promised she'd stay another week with my brother. The house on Ridgecrest Road was exactly as I'd left it, except that some of my wife's things were gone. Not everything. A suitcase's worth. Enough to be a message. I didn't call her. I called a friend of mine, a retired attorney I've known since our kids played Little League together, and I told him the situation over the phone, start to finish, without editorializing. He listened the way good lawyers listen, without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "You need to document everything, right now, tonight. Every date, every receipt, every email. The hospital stay, the Charlotte trip, the Morganton meeting. Don't move anything, don't throw anything away. And don't contact her about any of this directly." I wasn't planning to, I said. "Good," he said. "And Doug, get a family law attorney this week, not next week." I did exactly that. The documentation came together faster than I expected. The hospital, of course, was thorough. Visitor logs, cafeteria charges, the sign-in sheets, a written statement from my brother's floor nurse who remembered me specifically because I had brought her a coffee on Monday morning, the gas station receipt from Highway 70, the email chain from the Morganton project, time-stamped down to the minute. 47 photographs from my daughter's phone, uploaded to a shared folder with metadata intact, my attorney. A woman who looked younger than my daughter, but spoke like someone who had seen every version of this story twice before. Reviewed everything and was quiet for a moment. "The dates don't overlap with anything she's alleged," she said. "No," I said, "they don't. Has she hired an attorney? I don't know." "She will," she said. "Here's what you need to understand. The complaint she filed isn't going anywhere, because there's no evidence and a significant amount of counter-evidence. But it tells us something about the strategy she's preparing. This needs to move quickly." It did move quickly. My attorney filed a response to the sheriff's office, submitted all documentation, and requested that the complaint be formally reviewed. The responding deputy, a different one from the initial call, came to my attorney's office with a colleague, reviewed the materials, and was notably quiet on his way out. The complaint was dropped within 2 weeks. No action, no follow-up, no record, just gone. The divorce proceedings were less clean, but ultimately straightforward, given the paper trail that existed and the nature of what had happened. My wife had consulted an attorney, as mine had predicted. There were negotiations. There were a few unpleasant phone calls I didn't participate in directly. There were, eventually, agreements. I won't detail the financial specifics. That's not the point of this. What I will say is that she had significantly underestimated 2 things. The first was how well documented my life happened to be. I am an engineer by training, and I keep records the way other people keep dishes, in neat stacks I can find again. The second was how little I wanted to fight her. I wasn't willing to be falsely accused. I wasn't willing to let a manufactured paper trail become part of a legal proceeding. But I also wasn't interested in destroying her. I just wanted the truth to be visible, and it was. My brother came home from the hospital in early March. I drove to Asheville and spent a week at his house, doing the things that needed doing. Grocery runs, the bird feeder he couldn't reach, the back gutter that had been bothering him for months. We watched old basketball games on his couch and ate soup and didn't talk about my marriage much because there wasn't that much to say. One evening he asked me if I was angry. I thought about it honestly, the way he's always made me feel comfortable doing. Not really, I said. Tired, sad about some things, but not angry. He nodded. That's probably better. Probably, I said. I thought about the phone call in that hospital hallway. The fluorescent lights, the nurse's cart, the way I'd answered every question calmly and told the truth without raising my voice, not because I was trying to seem composed, but because the truth was so obviously and completely on my side that panic would have been redundant. There's a thing that happens when you know you've done nothing wrong. A kind of stillness. I don't mean you feel good. There's nothing good about being accused of something you didn't do by someone you spent 31 years building a life with. But the stillness is real. It holds you. I've thought about it a lot since then. About what I would tell someone else in that situation. Not young people. They have energy for things I've mostly set down. But someone my age, who's been through enough to know that most storms pass and most fires burn themselves out if you stop adding fuel. I think I'd say this. Tell the truth. Keep your records, hire good people, and don't let someone else's desperation make you desperate too. The facts have a way of arranging themselves if you give them room. The house on Ridgecrest Road sold in August. I moved into a smaller place closer to my daughter's family, a 2-bedroom rental in a quiet neighborhood with a porch I sit on most mornings when the weather allows. My grandchildren come over on Saturdays sometimes. The youngest one, the 3-year-old from the birthday photographs, the ones with the timestamps that helped prove I was in Charlotte and not Hendersonville, has started calling me by a nickname she invented herself. I won't repeat it here because it's embarrassing, but I don't mind it. I keep the records. I always will. It's just how my mind works. Some people would be bitter. I understand that. 31 years is a long time, and being accused of something you didn't do by the person who knows you best is a particular kind of wound, one that doesn't quite heal clean. I'd be lying if I said it didn't leave a mark. But I'm 64 years old, and I've had enough years to know that carrying bitterness is heavy work for diminishing returns. You set it down eventually, or it sets you down first. I chose to set it down first. I chose to set it down first. I chose to set it down. Most days that choice holds. There's something I keep coming back to even now, more than a year later. It's the moment I was sitting in that hospital hallway on the 4th floor of St. Luke's, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold, and I realized that the woman I had been married to for 31 years had filed a police report against me while I was keeping watch over my brother's recovery. Not because she was confused, not because she had made a mistake, but because she had made a calculation. That moment taught me something I don't think I could have learned any other way. What protected me wasn't luck. It wasn't the right connections or the right lawyer, though the lawyer helped. What protected me was a lifetime of doing things the right way. Keeping my records, showing up where I said I would be, telling the truth in small moments so that the truth was available to me in a large one. I am an engineer. I have always believed that systems hold when they are built honestly. I did not realize until that week that I had been building one about my own life without knowing it. Every time-stamped receipt, every email chain, every sign-in sheet, 47 photographs of a birthday party I attended instead of a parking lot I was accused of sitting in. Integrity is not something you perform when the stakes are high. It's something you practice when nothing seems to be at stake at all. And then one day, it's the only thing standing between you and a version of yourself that isn't true. I think about Douglas, about the man I was in that hallway, and I am honestly not sure I handled it with grace so much as I handled it with clarity. I knew what I had done and what I hadn't done, and that knowledge was steady in a way that panic never could have been. That steadiness came from somewhere. It came from years of choosing not to lie when lying would have been easier, not to cut corners when shortcuts were available, not to be the kind of man who needs to revise his story later. That's not virtue for its own sake. That's the only practical way I knew to live. And then there's the matter of getting through it. Not just surviving the accusation, but surviving the grief of it. 31 years. 2 kids. The house on Ridgecrest Road. You don't walk away from that without feeling the weight of what it was and what it turned out to be. I wouldn't pretend I didn't sit on my brother's porch on a cold February evening and feel something close to hollow. But I got up the next morning, and the one after that, not because I am particularly resilient by nature. I am not. I have always been someone who feels things slowly and deeply, but because I understood that the alternative was to let what she did finish something in me that she had no right to touch. My ability to keep going. My sense of who I am, those were mine. I was not going to hand them over. What I want anyone to take from this, if there's anything worth taking, is that the 3 things that carried me through were not dramatic, they were quiet. I tried to be honest before it mattered. I tried to think clearly when it would have been easier to react, and I tried to keep moving when the ground felt uncertain. None of those things guaranteed a good outcome. But they made it possible, and sometimes possible is enough to work with. The porch at my new place faces east. Most mornings, when the weather cooperates, I sit out there with my coffee and watch the light come in over the neighbor's oak tree. It's a small thing. I've come to believe that small things, accumulated honestly, are what a life is actually made of.